Well, good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. As always, we have a fantastic webinar on tap, but before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will be able to access it on demand later on. We will be sending out an email following today's webinar that will include a link to access the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if at any time during today's webinar you have a question for either of our panelists, please don't wait, don't hesitate, just use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your questions, and we'll get to as many as we can during the Q&A. All right, with that, we'll go ahead and kick off today's webinar, which is the 2019 State of DevOps Report, Database Best Practices for Strong DevOps. Our speakers today are Dr. Nicole Forsgren, who is the DORA Lead over at Google Cloud, and she's being joined by Robert Reeves, who is the co-founder and CTO of Datical. So welcome, guys. Thanks for joining me today.
Super happy to be hanging out with Dr. Nicole Forsgren.
Awesome.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
All right, well, I'm going to let you guys just start your chat, and I'll put myself on mute.
Thanks again. Okay, so I may run us through a quick agenda. Today, we are going to be talking about some of the key findings from this year's Accelerate State of DevOps report. I will also run us through some fun stats, because who doesn't love math? Okay, that might just be me. It's fine. There's some good stuff in here, though. We will also be chatting about how to get better, which this year I lovingly call Choose Your Own Adventure. We'll talk about performance. We'll talk about productivity. We'll talk about culture. Then we'll dig into some great database funness. And then we will, well, of course, I'll give you a giant teaser, because there's no way to cover everything in this year's report. So I'll give you a giant list of all of the fun stuff that we missed.
Wow, this sounds, this is a lot. Do you think we're going to be able to do this?
I mean, we can try.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. So first, I mean, anytime we talk about DevOps, that's going to start a fight, right? It's going to start a land war in Asia. So when I talk about DevOps, this is what I talk about. I talk about developing and delivering software with speed and stability so that we can deliver value to our end users and our customers. Now, I can say it because I've been saying it for about 6 years now. So let's back up just a little bit. I talk about developing and delivering software with speed and stability. Now, some people may have been hearing about the 4 key metrics, because a lot of organizations in the industry now are using them to track their technology transformations. So what are these 4 key metrics when I say this big sentence again? So developing and delivering, these are both sides of software development delivery, right? So it's the dev and the ops. So speed and stability. What is speed? It's lead time. It's how long it takes to get from code check-in to code running in production. Deployment frequency. So how often do I deploy code? Those are our speed metrics. Those are in green. Now, stability. What are my stability metrics? These are in blue. It's my change fail rate. What's the percentage of changes that I deploy to production that fail? Now, it's not like a whole massive epic failure. It's also if it causes an incident, if it requires attention. Now, the other metric is time to restore service. If I do have some type of failure, how long does it take me to get that back up? So these are my 4 key metrics, 2 that are speed, 2 that are stability. Now you'll notice I also have availability. So once I get that code in production, how well do I do at keeping that up? This is about the promises that I make and keep to my customers. So again, what is DevOps? When I talk about DevOps, I'm just talking about developing, delivering software with speed and stability, and then keeping it up. So that's what we're talking about here. So if we go on, when we look at the data, we've got movement. So in the 2018 data, I take these 4 metrics and I do some stats magic, and I see how those especially the 4 metrics, the speed and the stability ones, how they group, how they, actually it's called a cluster analysis, how they cluster. And what we found is that speed and stability move together, and they've moved together for 6 years in a row. So I don't see trade-offs. The highest performers do really well at all 4, while the low performers kind of struggle at all 4 of them. So if we look at last year's data in 2018, we saw that 48% of our high performers, of the people that took the study, were high performers, and 7% of them were optimizing on all 4. It was a subset of that group. Now, look at how our data shifted. Look at how the respondents moved. That elite performance group almost tripled, and they broke out into a completely separate group now. Now, take a look at the low performers. They shrunk. They went from 15% of respondents to 12%. Now look at our medium performers. It got bigger. Now, where does that movement come from? Some from the low performers that got better, some from the highest performers that fell. So in 2018, that was 48%. In 2019, it's 23 plus 20, so 43%. So where does this come from? Some struggling from complexity, and some from among those, and I'm sure you've seen this, R2, that they think that they've achieved nirvana, they think they've achieved level 5, whatever it is on their maturity model, and then they just kind of sit.
How do you say it? You say we've become the DevOps?
Yes, I am the DevOps. And then they stop investing in getting better. And the rest of the world, the rest of like their technological complexity catches up to them, and they struggle under that weight and they fall back.
So is this similar to people signing up for the gym in January and then going on a spring break trip and not going back? Is that what we're saying?
Or when so either they don't go back, or when they kind of try to keep up and they finally do go back, it's really hard, right? Like you can't be running marathons and take 6 months or a year or 2 years off and think you can go straight back to running 26 miles. It's hard, right? You have to work back up. If you stay in shape, sure, maybe you can take a week off, but you can't take a couple of years off and expect to be right back there. So what this tells us though, and I think the really encouraging thing that we're seeing, and by the way, this is echoed by many other industry analysts, is that DevOps has crossed the chasm, or again, like whatever you want to call it, technology transformation, digital transformation. It's crossed the chasm. Many people are adopting these methods and they're seeing fantastic results. And I think the most encouraging message is that it's possible for anyone. It just requires executing on key capabilities. And I love the analogy that you just used there, is that it's I say it just requires executing. Yeah, it does take work, but anyone can do it.
So I can't go to the gym and just hang out in the sauna. I actually have to do some stuff.
If you want the performance outcomes, it does require automation and technology. It does require changes in optimizing process. It does require good investments to make the culture good. But then we do see the outcomes that have been promised for so long. Okay, so what else do we have? This is what it looks like when I say elite, high, medium, and low performers. So when we say these elite performers, again, deployment frequency multiple times per day, lead time for changes less than a day, time to restore service less than an hour, and this change fail rate is low. Now look at the low performers. Their deployment frequency between 1 and 6 months, lead time for changes between 1 and 6 months, time to restore service between a week and a month, and that change fail rate is really high. Right, and this is what happens when we deploy so infrequently. Our changes batch up so that when we finally do push them to prod, it's really large. So we have a higher likelihood of failure, right? We've increased that blast radius. And when we do have that inevitable failure, it's very difficult to correct it. It's difficult to debug, right? So, sometimes people say, well, I can't just move faster and have similar, that corresponding stability. No, we tell you predictably how to get better performance, but it's not just faster and stability. It's also slower brings instability. The two go together. Okay, so what does that look like then? What do we see? And how do they compare? Right, so when we compare the highest and lowest performers, we see 200 times more frequent code deployments, over 100 times faster lead time from commit to deploy, over 2,600 times faster time to recover from incidents, and 7 times lower change fail rate. Now, the first thing people think about when they see this is they think about features, right? Delivering features faster. And it's so much more than that, right? It's also keeping up with compliance and regulatory changes. It's also keeping up with security incidents. It's also changes to infrastructure. It's also, R2, keeping up with database, right?
Well, it's everybody's got to play.
Exactly.
Everybody's got to play.
It's the totality of your code, your infrastructure, your security, your database. It's everything that touches your code and everything that your code touches. And what does this mean about a superior and safer and higher quality experience for your users and your end customers? And so often people only think about pushing features and having a better app on your phone. But it's about having a better experience that is safer, higher quality, and doesn't break, right?
Well, it's, there's Admiral Grace Hopper. There's a quote that was always attributed to her, and that is that, a ship in harbor is safe, but that's not what ships are made for. And, you actually, by going and doing more frequent deployments, and you actually get better at it. Yeah, there's going to be some risk. Yeah, there's, but just like with that ship, they're always taking them out. The Navy's taking them out, doing drills. So when they do have to do what they do, they're prepared for it. Yeah, they'll be safer in a port, but that's not what it's made for.
And I think there's also inherent risk in never using them. Right? There's risk in software that is never deployed and never changed, because then you have security threats in software that's never changed, right? In IPs that are never rotated. So it's just different risk and threat exposure. Yeah, so I love your point there. Okay, so what else do we see? So availability, right? So I love this point here. Availability is about the promises that we make and keep to our customers and end users. So when we talk about availability, this is when we measure how well teams define their availability targets, track their current availability, and learn from any outages. Many people think about this in terms of the reliability of their systems, right? So I love another way to think about this. So if you click for me, Arshu, day 1 is short, but day 2 is long, right? So day 1 is when we make our system, when we ship it. Day 2 is, we got to keep that up for a long time. And this is a good way to think about our systems. Okay, so we do tech because just because it's fun? Is that the only reason we do tech? Well, I mean, yeah. And I mean, that's why I went into tech, but also we do tech because technology delivers value. And we found for so many years in our research that elite performers are twice as likely to meet or exceed their organizational performance goals. Now, I say organizational performance here because it's so broad reaching. Yes, it includes the money thing, right? Profitability, productivity, market share. It also includes what academics call non-commercial goals. Things like effectiveness, efficiency, customer satisfaction, delivering on mission goals. And some people who are in the for-profit space are like, delivering on mission goals. Those are some of the words that we use in government or not-for-profit spaces, right? So if your mission is to deliver value or services to your constituents as efficiently as possible, that is delivering on your mission. And what we see is that by leveraging technology elite performers are twice as likely to meet or exceed their goals, whether they are money-based or not money-based, or both, right? Because I love the fact that for the last 5 or 10 or more years for very forward-facing companies, we have goals that span both.
Well, and if there are executives saying, well, we don't care about that, we care about money, they just lack the imagination to see how those other goals tie back to profitability, to revenue growth.
Yep. Also, if you only care about money, I got you. This also helps drive profit.
We can do it all. We can do it all.
If you're in a government or not-for-profit space and you're like, but I don't care about money, that's not my jam. I got you. Got you there too. Technology really is delivering and driving value because it helps with so many things, right? It drives efficiencies, it delivers value, it helps with scalability, reliability, repeatability. It takes over tasks that humans are not particularly good at so that humans can then focus on interesting, challenging, novel problems that machines, frankly, suck at. So, okay, hopefully I have convinced people. Okay, right, so it matters. Okay, so then how do we get better? How do we help with the speed and stability to deliver value thing? How would you say it is we get there? This is the choose your own adventure portion of the program. So I've been talking about this performance piece. So SDO is software delivery and operational performance. That's the speed and stability and availability piece. And we just talked about organizational performance. If you kind of scan down from there, you can see the things that predict it. Those are the arrows. Culture, change management, cloud, technical practices, disaster recovery testing. These come from this year's report, this year's research. We also have 6 years of research. This year, in addition, I got a little ambitious and I did an additional set of research looking into productivity. And we investigated the things that predict productivity. So we will touch briefly on both of these. Like I said, today's section is going to be a bit of a teaser. So you can dive into the report and see what you want to look into. Okay, let's start with performance. So what does this look like? So this year's report, we have dark bold outlines around performance and organizational performance because these are common goals. So from here, you can look at constructs that drive performance in these goals. Anytime you see a green box, this is a construct, right? So it's a thing we can measure. It's a set of ideas. Anything that's in bold, like culture of psychological safety, clear change process, these are things that we measured for the first time this year. If it's not in bold, like cloud or continuous delivery, we've measured it in previous years and we revalidated it this year. Anytime you see an arrow, this is a predictive relationship. So this is what makes the State of DevOps report from DORA unique in that we go far beyond just correlation into prediction. So you can read these lines as drives, predicts, impacts. So cloud drives and impacts software delivery performance, which is speed and stability, and availability. Now, if you see a line with a minus sign, you can say that that negatively impacts or reduces. So a heavyweight change process reduces software delivery performance, that speed and stability. So that's how we read this chart. So if we go on, let's dive into a couple of these. So cloud. Cloud is the differentiator for elite performance. But what we see is that of the people who say they're in the cloud, only 29% of them are actually doing the 5 things that are important, those things listed on the right. Now, a lot of people are like, well, but I'm in the cloud, but I don't actually see the benefits. So what's important when you do research is you have to be able to measure it. So these 5 things are really what makes the cloud the cloud. And by the way, I didn't make this up. This comes from NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology. So let's run through these. These 5 are on-demand self-service. So you have to be able to provision resources by yourself, not hidden behind a manual gate. So if you have to fill out like a ServiceNow ticket, that doesn't count. Okay, step 2, broad network access. Can you access your cloud from several different types of devices? Number 3, resource pooling. Does your cloud like combine resources automatically for you. 4, rapid elasticity, bursting like magic, right? Does it handle that for you? Up and down, by the way. And then 5, measured service. Do you only pay for what you use? So the interesting thing is this last piece on the left. Elite performers were 24 times more likely to have met all 5 of these cloud characteristics than low performers. And I think this explains so much about the conversation around cloud right now. I meet with so many people and have conversations with so many people who say, well, you know, we did this cloud thing, but I don't see the performance. You know, I don't see these big performance gains I was promised. And I'm like, okay, so like, did you do the cloud or did you just write the check for the cloud? You know, it's like I got myself a gym membership, but again, you have to do the work. You can't just write the check and walk away. That's what tech was in the 80s and the 90s, and that's why no one saw benefits. That's why everyone called IT a cost center and got real angry about it and walked away. They didn't put in the work to make it something different. It had to be technology plus process plus culture. And then the world changed. Right? Now, the thing I love about this is this is focusing on architectural outcomes. The cloud makes this much easier, but we can architect on-prem data centers to have some of these characteristics. We can architect several other things to have some of these characteristics as well. I mean, I'm not sure if I'm sure you've seen some of these things, right, R2?
What, one or two?
Maybe. I can hear it in your laugh.
Yeah, it's, you know, the thing is that these 5 characteristics, this really defines, you know, how you should be evaluating your cloud strategy. If you're just lifting and shifting, moving an app to the cloud, and you're not taking advantage of, for example, elasticity, being able to, you know, add capacity and then remove it.
Yep.
You know, you really should be evaluating that. If all you're doing is just moving it over there because somebody in IT wants to boost up their resume, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. But if you're ready to take advantage of this, if you're ready to say, okay, well, we want on-demand self-service. We need people to be able to provision their own dev and test instances, for example, in the cloud. You need to enable that. Now, you might have restrictions, you might have standards, you might have some compliance, and you know, you might have to go through audits. So you give a limited menu. You know, it's a think more prefix. You know, you want the beef or the chicken, and you don't have to give them everything. But that's still on-demand self-service. You can balance the needs internally of your company, and also look at this research and say, all right, we need to get better. How do we balance that? And I think the Jeff Dowd, the CIO of Vanguard, he has a great line about whenever he started moving them to the cloud, he brought all the cloud antibodies into the room. So this was security, network, procurement, all right? They pay attention to that measured service. And then get everybody in the room and say, okay, look, this is the definition. This is how we're going to measure it. This is how we're going to improve. And, you know, you got to snap the chalk line, get a baseline, do it,
Yep.
and then see how you improve.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so here's cloud. What else do we have? Code maintainability. So this is a new one this year. And it was interesting because we wanted to take a look into what helps people who are writing code maintain that code. Now, people traditionally think of developers, but this can be any type of code. This can be infrastructure code. This can be database code. So I said database code, right? Because we often think of things like SQL, right? But this can be all types of SQL, right? This can be triggers, this can be procedures, this can be all types of things. So code maintainability contributes to continuous delivery and helps reduce technical debt. So stay tuned, we'll talk about that in a second. So code maintainability are systems and tools that make it easy to change code maintained by other teams, find code in your code base, reuse other people's code, and add, upgrade, and migrate to new versions of dependencies without breaking code. So that ends up being like a really interesting thing to think about in your systems, and if you have support for that.
Yeah, it's, look, there is, part of this is not, frankly, when we're talking about database code, we're having to go to our shared data services team to get insight into that code.
Yeah, and it's tough when your shared I'm using finger quotes pretty hard here. It's difficult when your shared database team is your system that makes it easy to find code and understand the implications of a change, because they end up being a hard constraint.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen this over and over again. Somebody changes a stored procedure, adds a new required parameter, and it breaks everything because they had no idea who was depending on that. We got to get
aren't
better.
Scalable.
Yeah, if we're relying on people and individual heroics and what's trapped between an individual's ears, it's not maintainable.
I feel attacked. as a former / current founder CEO, I'm currently trying to get as much information out of my brain as possible and codify it and turn it into procedures and code and extensible, formal, repeatable, auditable, automated systems, because I am not y'all, I want to take vacation.
Yeah, you're not scalable. As an individual.
I want to get promoted.
Yeah. Yes.
I want to do amazing things. I mean, I love what I do also. And I'm pretty good at remembering stuff. I suck at names. I'm sorry. Some people are like, she forgets my name. I know I'm awful at names. I remember backstories. I'm pretty good at remembering codes and systems, but also I need a break. Y'all, we all need breaks.
Well, and that's the thing. We cannot be tied to individuals' behavior. All right, we cannot be, because when we try to scale that, for example, you look at, I see over and over again, okay, we've got 10 DBAs in this department, and we want to double the number of releases we're doing. Well, most companies look at that and they say, we have to double the number of DBAs. So they have to hire 10 more DBAs. Probably a little bit more, because once you get beyond 2 pizza size teams, and you have to have management there. And so it's actually, it's not doubling, it's a little bit more. So 110%.
Because you have switching costs and handoff costs, and
and it's a thing. Yeah, and you're gonna drop stuff, you're gonna miss stuff. So instead of saying, oh, we want to do the same thing we've always been doing, no, take a step back and figure out, look at this, and how are we maintaining our code base? How are we maintaining our systems? How can we make it easier for the things you said here? How do we find code? How do we reuse it? How can I, upgrade, my system and use a different stored procedure or something else, a web service, whatever. These are the questions. Instead of just saying, oh, well, we've always done it this way, let's just hire more people and just keep doing it. And with a tight labor market, that's not the solution. You just got to get.
And I love that this example came up, because so often people only think about changing code maintained by other teams where another team is another dev team, which is very real and very true. But what happens when that other team is a database team or is a team with a slightly different discipline? Because then it's even more important.
Or demeanor.
Yeah, right.
Different culture.
Different skill set. Then it's even more important. Okay, we're gonna run out of time. Let's keep going. I mean, I'll talk about this all day. Okay. Improving productivity. So this time we put a dark black box around productivity to call your attention there, because this is a common team or organizational goal, is improving productivity. Now, just as a quick note, notice that improving productivity leads to work recovery, which, by the way, it's like disconnecting from work. So that's work-life balance, that's leaving work at work, which, by the way, reduces burnout. Okay, but how do we improve productivity? That's going to be a culture of psychological safety. That's having useful, easy to use tools. That's having good search, internal and external. And what hurts productivity is technical debt. So understanding how we can reduce technical debt through, like we just talked about, code maintainability, so that it's easy to maintain code and understand the implications of changing code, and then having loosely coupled architecture and monitoring, because these types of things help us understand the changes in our systems. Okay, so let's dig into a couple things here. But first, we want to talk about, what do I mean by productivity? So productivity is not writing lines of code, because that just leads to bloated software. Productivity is not story points, because if I have story points and R2 has story points, I'm never going to help you, because I will not get my story points done, because I will do as I am incentivized to do. So productivity, this is interesting because this is coming out of a few different streams of research right now. It's the ability to get complex, time-consuming tasks completed with minimal distractions and interruptions. This is the type of productivity that helps us leave work at work and reduce burnout. So we know this, right? I'm sure so many of us have a day that we can think about when we really hit a good flow, right? Like, we know we had a good day. This is important because when we have a good flow, we can shut our brains off when we go home. In contrast, if we have a day where we're busy all day long, but we seem to get nothing done, it's really hard to shut our brains off at night when we go home, because we keep spinning through all the things that we need to get done. So when we did our research, this is the type of productivity we focused on. So technical debt was one of those things that we looked at. Technical debt is a really difficult thing to deal with, because it really hinders our productivity, because we just fight up against it all the time. Technical debt was introduced in '92 by Ward Cunningham. When he talked about this, he said, this is what happens when we fail to maintain immature code. So many of us hit this. And this is what happens when we include code or systems that have these types of characteristics: known bugs that go unfixed, so instead we can keep churning out new features. I feel attacked. Insufficient test coverage, problems related to low code quality or poor design, coder artifacts that aren't cleaned up or are no longer used. And remember, sometimes the best code is code that's deleted, right? Or systems that are deleted, or old flags that should be cleaned up. Implementations the team doesn't have expertise in and therefore cannot debug or maintain. Incomplete migration, obsolete technology. And by the way, obsolete is relative to the team using it and their skill set. And then incomplete or outdated documentation or missing comments. This is huge. Now, this is all also very relative to the team, the size of the team, the expertise of the team, the prioritization of the team. So how do we deal with this, right? So I touched on some of this just before. So one way to reduce technical debt is by actively refactoring. But what other types of support systems can we get? Because it's hard to carve out time for refactoring, especially if some of those things are a result of prioritization in the context around us, right? If I'm not given time for like fixing bugs because I have to churn out more features, how am I going to have time for refactoring my code? So organization, first of all, PS organizations, do that. Do your job. Second of all, organizations can make I pull no punches. Second of all, organizations can make smart investments in maintainable code, loosely coupled architecture, and monitoring. And it's really interesting because Ward Cunningham's original article suggested that one of the best ways to help people deal with this immature code and correct this immature code is to be able to maintain a picture of the system in their heads, Well, we can't do that in what Ward originally suggested was that each person keep their system very small and keep it to themselves so that they could always keep a picture in their heads. That's not possible, right? We work on increasingly complex distributed systems with several people working on it. So if instead we can have systems that help us understand what our system looks like through monitoring and observability, have a loosely coupled architecture so that we're only working on smaller decomposed pieces, and have maintainable code so that we can understand what the downstream implications are and find other pieces of code. This really helps.
But this goes away if you kill the system.
I mean, also, yes.
Yeah, so that is last year at DevOps Enterprise Summit, Courtney Kistler and Ann Bradley from Nike, they were first day keynote.
Oh, it was such a good talk.
Oh, it was phenomenal because, Courtney's up there and she's VP of digital at Nike. All right. So she's the techie. And Anne is their chief privacy officer. She's a techie too. She's hardcore. But Courtney had been trying to kill a system. And every single time, she got right into the red zone to punch it in and put a bullet in it, somebody would bring it back to life and they'd have to start all over again. And what she did was she reached out to Anne, and as part of, chief privacy officer, she said, okay, if we do this, we are violating GDPR. For us, the fine would probably be about $1 billion. And I put our odds about getting fined at 50-50. So expected value is 500 million. That's what Courtney went in. She was talking about technical debt and those sorts of things, and it's just a pain to maintain this. But she brought the lawyer in, Anne, and said, hey, if we keep this alive, it's 500 million. It's going to cost us. Whose budget is that coming out of?
Yep.
And they quickly put a bullet in it. So what I would say is if you're trying to kill a system, do what Courtney and Ann did. And you don't have to just talk about technical debt. You can also talk about the impact onto the business side of things. Man, I'm a big fan of deleting code. I do like it. Just get rid of it. Put it out of your head. Get rid of a system. Make it disappear.
Yep, for sure. Okay. So what do we have now? Oh yeah. So there's this culture thing.
Culture in DevOps?
I mean, I hear culture matters, but depending on who you ask, I hear different things. I mean, we tend to circle around similar things, like breaking down silos, having blameless postmortems, trusting each other, but you do hear different things. For the last few years, we've researched Westrum's organizational culture, but I wanted to try something a little bit different. So a few years ago, Project Aristotle was a research effort out of Google, where they found that psychological safety and trust were a big driver for performance in teams in driving outcomes, which was interesting because what they had found was, or what they thought they would find was that the perfect mix of skills and abilities would drive outcomes. And that wasn't what they found at all. Really what they found was that it really comes down to team dynamics. And so we reached out to the Aristotle team and they shared their survey instrument. And we tested that. And this is particularly interesting because when this first came out, everyone thought it was interesting and exciting. But there were a few people who said, I wonder if this will hold externally, because of course it works at Google, right? They have brilliant engineers, you don't even get into Google until you've met this really high bar of an interview. Also, they have scooters and free lunch, and I wonder if this will work in companies around the world and in different cultures and different contexts and highly regulated organizations and startups and everywhere. So we tested this in this year's State of DevOps report, and here's what we find. we found that indeed this same culture of trust and psychological safety has a positive impact, is positively predictive of software delivery performance, that's speed and stability, organizational performance, and productivity. So I think it's really positive, right? It's really nice to see that these results also indicate that teams with this culture see significant benefits in many contexts, in many areas. And so, this is another piece of evidence showing that culture matters. But again, for many people in DevOps, we're like, well, yeah, no surprise, right? But this is science, right? So testing it is really important. Okay.
Well, we certainly see it anecdotally, but it's wonderful when this report comes out every year, because the people that have been preaching this can say, no, look, we're right again, here you go. And this will, if we do this, good things happen once again.
It was truly interesting to see that this holds in very different contexts.
Yeah, it's but it hasn't been spread around, in different certainly the dev teams, they were the first to adopt this because it was easier. These are the teams that brought us into Agile, started using the cloud first, but there's other folks in the organization that aren't getting it. And for whatever reason, they're not. And this is one of my favorite quotes. We're already doing the DevOps. It's just not everybody in the organization is doing it. And so that's one of the things that we focus on. It's really important that when we're talking about these software delivery outcomes, that we really understand that it's not just the lowercase a part of the application. Like you saw on Dr. Forsgren's slide about, we need certainly about deployment, continuous deployment, and certainly getting rid of that heavyweight change process. And we've done that in parts of the organization. We just haven't applied it everywhere. Guess what? Your app kind of needs a database to run. And if you are not moving at the same speed that the folks that are compiling code and delivering that binary are, then you're not really doing it. Remember, the first thing, the thing that measures, is key metric, is lead time, which is I've checked in code, it's out running in production. It's not halfway there, oh, I delivered it to test, I'm done. No. It's got to be all the way out in production. And if you are still doing tickets, if you are still waiting on a person, you're not doing it right. And just like the folks that are complaining about moving to the cloud and not getting full ROI, until you have every part of your application from infrastructure all the way up to the app, including the database, then you're not done. You still need some work. Including the heavyweight change process in this year's survey, I loved seeing that because I had been really wanting to see evidence that by dealing with, the change approval boards and ticketing and these sorts of things and manual reviews, I felt that had a negative impact.
Yeah, we really upped the science this year. So I snuck this slide in. So in 2014, we looked at change approvals and we found a negative correlation with heavyweight change approvals. This year, we kind of upped the science and we found that heavyweight processes and controls negatively impact SDO performance. So I want to jump in on, so what's SDO performance? Remember, this is speed and stability, which means it slows you down and it decreases stability. So let's say it another way. Heavyweight change approvals slow you down and they increase instability. And by the way, this is highly correlated with enterprises. So enterprises, we did additional analysis this year. This is particularly difficult in enterprises. We also teased out clear change processes. They help get work done faster, more stably, and they reduce burnout. And like you're saying, R2, like this is a particular difficulty among databases, at least anecdotally from what I've seen. I'm sure you have much more experience here.
Oh, one or two. Handful, a meager handful. You know, I love this picture, all right, because this is somebody pumping gas in New Jersey. And this was not done out of safety. You know, the powers that be in New Jersey and also Oregon, but in New Jersey, they didn't say, wow, pumping gas is inherently dangerous and we need trained professionals, the best of the best, to put this explosive liquid inside this container. And where it came from is that somebody who owned a gas station in the 40s in New Jersey was a very lazy person. And that's a good thing. Remember the 3 virtues of a good software engineer, according to Larry Wall: laziness, impatience, hubris. Okay. This lazy gas station owner said, I will give you a discount if you pump your own gas. And I don't know, he was like whittling or something. I don't know what they did in the 40s. And they just, you know, avoided polio, whatever. And so he offered this discount. And then everybody, all the other gas station owners, they said, well, I don't want to give a discount. So they formed a industry consortium, and they got together and they lobbied the state legislature to not allow this. So you couldn't pump your own gas in New Jersey. There we go. Now, 2 things. One, you would expect with a trained professional doing this, that there are far fewer gas station mishaps in New Jersey and Oregon than the rest of the nation. And that we are just fools, all 48 other states are just fools for allowing this kind of wanton, you know, craziness, bedlam. That's just not the case. You would think that because they're trained professionals, it would be faster. Well, I would challenge anybody to go fill up their gas station on the New Jersey Turnpike at one of those stops in the middle. It is not fast, okay? When we distribute the responsibility to pump our own gas, it is just more efficient. And this idea that we are going to have a gate for our database schema changes, it's just boo, boo. There was a time when we did want the world's fastest computer, the human brain, to review every single one of these changes. And when we were releasing once a month, once a quarter, hey, that was cool, no problem. That's not the case. And it's actually this idea that we're going to have this heavyweight change approval process to lead to more stability. Well, it's a myth, okay? There is zero evidence, and ask Dr. Forsgren, because she collected all the evidence. I had nothing to do with this. But she has found that there is zero evidence to support that a heavyweight change approval process leads to more stability. And in fact, when you have more approvals, you know, this idea that if we are having problems with our releases, oh, let's put more approval process in place. No. In fact, what you should be doing is doing a better job of communicating what that process is and helping teams navigate and get better. It's not about putting in line judges. It's about training the folks that are building and delivering software to build and deliver better software. That's all it is. A change approval board is not going to solve this problem. Nicole, did you want to add anything to that?
I think you got it.
Yay, I did my homework. Okay, so what should our DBAs be doing? All right. Look, leaders, and this is a quote from the report, you know, leaders at every level, you know, you got to move away from this process. And, you know, instead of that, you know, change approval board being gatekeepers, you know, you shall not pass. Instead, they need to be working on, okay, how do we get more people to pass? How do we in a sense, automate ourselves out of a job? What can we do to make our existence moot? And that goes back to that psychological safety, all right? Do you have the culture at your company where people can say, I'm going to automate myself out of a job. I'm going to put systems in place that and distribute them around, distribute them across the entire company so everybody can approve and do it the right way instead of me and my team doing it. What can I do to enable others to do it so I'm unnecessary? Boy, howdy, is that scary. There's a lot of folks that look at that and say, wait a minute, because they have, maybe they remember the big outsourcing boom of the 90s and the aughts, the 2000s, and realize that that was just bad, bad, bad. You need to have that kind of culture at your company where you can encourage people to say, hey, look, we want you to automate yourself out of a job because we got more important things that you need to work on, that move to the cloud, to help the developers write better database schema changes. Alongside that, developers have some work they need to do as well. It's not just having web services. Oh, we're using containers. That'll solve this problem. All right. What I would encourage developers to do is instead of going directly to the database, that could they create web services so that other people can query that database through the web service. That allows our database professionals to be able to change that schema and to work with the team that's building that web service so that we don't have to worry about, oh, well, I've got to refactor this schema here. I'm doing something and it's going to break something. No, I have an API contract through the web service. I'm not going to change that, but it doesn't matter to you what that schema looks like. So we're going to allow that team to make the changes and it's going to be okay. The reason why we have these gatekeepers is because so many people are going directly to the database. And we're concerned about what touches to that customer table. If you change that, what is the impact on the other software? That is the opposite of code maintainability. So I would encourage the developers that are on this webinar to think about what can you do to eliminate the need for other people to go to the database. Now, there's certainly some things that we do at Datical to help with that. The first is, a database code packager, check-in SQL scripts will automatically create an immutable artifact. So you can put that into your CD process. But I think eliminating the need for that heavyweight change approval process is key to what we offer our customers. Dynamic rules engine, the ability to enforce standards so a human doesn't have to look at a SQL script to make sure that you're prefacing tables with T underscore, making sure that if you add a foreign key, the columns in that foreign key already have an index. And being able to simulate those changes, to forecast them and say, hey, this is what's going to happen. This provides visibility.
I'm seeing reducing technical debt all over the slide.
Yeah, it does a little bit of that, just a little.
Yeah, I'm seeing my performance and productivity research model all over this slide. It's kind of dope.
Well, it is. I got to tell you, it's something that when we started this, it is. I think all of us in DevOps saw this. And for us at Datical, we just saw that it wasn't being applied to the database. It was being ignored. But you didn't ignore it.
Which is kind of silly. I mean, you can't do stuff without data.
No, you can't. But, it's like the Rolling Stones, they can't get on stage. They can't close a set unless they play Satisfaction or one of their older hits.
Yeah.
So this is going back just 1 year, last year's report.
Oh, blast from the past.
I know. But this is a good one. And the thing that I really liked from this is that, yeah, okay, if you include the database, good things happen. But one of the things that you found last year, and this is where I learned what this term meant, including the database, is not differentiated across low, medium, high, and elite performers, which, as I understand, what that means is that it doesn't matter if you are low, medium, high, or elite. If you include the database, you're going to have a positive outcome. So it's not something
I
that
remember
you
the
should
first time I
wait.
said that. You were like, what do you mean? And I'm like, it's important for everybody. Everybody needs to do it.
Yes.
Yep.
So that's the thing I wanted to kind of leave everybody with. Like, yes, Datical can certainly help, but you got to tackle this problem. If you don't, you are going to be in that group that Dr. Forsgren showed where that medium got a little bit higher. You're going to be the folks that backslide if you don't tackle this problem because, you know, bad news, your competitors are already doing it.
Yeah. Or I mean, like another way to think about it is like, if you haven't done it yet, like that's cool. Maybe you've got another problem. Like this is going to be a thing for you. Like at some point, database is going to be your constraint.
Yeah, at some point.
Everybody's got data.
One of these days.
Yep. It's a thing. Okay, so we got to wrap. Oh, I could talk about this all day. And I wrote about it for a long time. Okay, so this is what we talked about. Is DevOps even a thing? Getting better. Choose your own adventure. Performance, productivity, culture. Also, there's so much more. We didn't even talk about disaster recovery testing and how, y'all, nobody's doing it. Like only 40% of people are doing it even annually.
Okay. Will you talk about that at DevOps Enterprise Summit?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
I still need to finish that talk. Change approvals, we touched on it, but not enough. Open source, oh my gosh, there's so much there. More cloud and costs, that's a teaser. And how to scale transformation successfully. We didn't even touch on that. Okay, here's how to find all the goodness. If you go to cloud.google.com/DevOps, the 2018 report is there so you can dig into more database stuff. And the 2019 report is there. And honestly, like all of our reports are there. And a whole, see how I keep saying and? There's so much. And DORA's previously proprietary, like knowledge base, all of our good stuff from 2014 to 2017 and a whole bunch of more stuff is there. So like so much goodness. I know we said we'd have time for questions. We might have time for one. Have two.
I don't think we have time for questions.
I don't think we have time.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. Okay, if you want to send in questions, they'll like email me and R2 and can we at least turn it into like a blog post?
Yeah, you guys can do whatever you want with it.
Like how I just signed y'all up for something?
That's right. Yay. No, really, if you do have a question for Dr. Forsgren or for Robert, please just use your GoToWebinar control panel. We don't have time to do it today, but I'll make sure that those guys get your questions.
You will definitely hear back from us, and with all these really good questions, I love the idea of just publishing it so that everybody can benefit because that's doing the DevOps.
Awesome, awesome. We love doing the DevOps.
This was fun.
Hey, well, you guys are awesome as always, and I know the audience got a lot out of it. And these State of DevOps reports are always lots of fun to hear about. So thanks to you both for parsing it out for us. I really appreciate it. I just want to remind the audience before we hang up that today's event has been recorded. So if you missed any or all of it, or if you just want to listen to it again, you will have the opportunity to do so. We are going to be sending out an email later today that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And the webinar is also going to be living on the DevOps.com website, so you can always find it there. Just go to DevOps.com/webinars, check in the on-demand section, and it should be right there waiting for you. As I said before, Robert and Nicole, both of you, thank you so much for taking the time and giving such a great presentation. Really appreciate it. And this is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am signing off. Have a great day, everybody.